President-elect Joe Biden, who's known for his willingness to engage in austerity politics, is suddenly willing to set aside concerns about deficit spending in order to help improve the ailing economy. In fact, he issued some of these statements recently. Let's hear a little bit of what he had to say.
We're going to be proposing an entire package, and parts of that package are of equal consequence to people. Unemployment insurance, being able to continue with rent forbearance, the whole range of issues. So that's number one. We think that they all have to be dealt with. The price tag will be high. But as I said, made scant reference to in my opening comments, the overwhelming consensus among the leading economists, left, right, and center, is that in order to keep the economy from collapsing this year and getting much, much worse, we should be investing significant amounts of money right now to grow the economy. And that's a pretty wide consensus.
He also mentioned, and I think he's absolutely right about this, that the $900 billion relief package that was passed by Congress in response to coronavirus isn't enough to pull people out of the economic hardships that they're experiencing right now, which I, of course, 100% agree with. And later in his speech, he got a little more specific about where he would direct that money to. We'll get to that in just a second. But Francesca, I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on this, pick your brain, and see if you're, believing where Biden's coming from here. Do you think he's being, sincere in wanting to pass trillions of dollars in, spending to pull people out of terrible economic situations?
Short answer, I sure as hell hope so. Because that was a surprising statement, and one that I think we've needed to hear from leaders around the world, right? I mean, the austerity is embraced by the left and the right. It's a consensus. I mean, it's on, neoliberals as well as far right fascists like Donald Trump are super into that. I mean, they're into spending, but only in the form of tax breaks for billionaires. So I'm absolutely heartened to hear that, and it kind of sounds like, Biden doesn't really, for all the fake platitudes that I think maybe some who were disappointed in the Obama administration received, there was a lot of hope, a lot of change, and a lot of that, and then not so much on the delivery. Biden doesn't really do platitudes that much, which is both kind of like, it can be a little bit of a snoozer, not to lean into the sleepy Biden stereotype, but it can be a little bit like, come on, you need to rally people. But he also doesn't just say stuff kind of just to say it. If he's saying it, it means that there is a huge amount of pressure that his administration, that people that he's tapped, Bernie Sanders, are pushing for this. And man, what a moment. We need this. Millions have been laid off and are unemployed now because of the pandemic. The rollout of the vaccine is, I know we're going to talk about later in California, is completely stalled. People are hurting. So I'm so glad to hear that it might be more than just the $2,000. It'll be a whole set of programs.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I hadn't thought of that. I mean, Joe Biden was notorious during the Democratic primaries for being kind of like vicious to anyone who questioned him during his rallies or his campaigning. If anyone had a problem with his past regarding Social Security, his effort to cut it in the past, those kinds of things, he had a pretty salty response to those rally goers and seemed to be pretty defiant and unapologetic about his record. So it is interesting to see him, say this, and there is certainly some influence by people like Senator Bernie Sanders, which, to be quite honest, I didn't think Senator Sanders would have any influence over Biden. I mean, I know that he was pushing. I know that Sanders worked really hard to convince progressives who had voted for him in the primaries to back Biden, but Sanders is really happy with the statement. He says the president-elect is exactly right, that this is not the time for austerity politics. We cannot maintain the austerity economics that have allowed the very rich to do phenomenally in this country while working people suffer. And I always highlight this statistic because it just blows my mind, and it really does help to understand the severity of this situation. 8 million Americans are experiencing poverty for the first time since last summer, which just shows you how terrible it is. And to your point, Francesca, tens of millions of Americans are still laid off during this pandemic through no fault of their own. So it's important to mention that. Now let's go to the next video though, because he gets a little more specific about how he would direct this funding. Let's watch.
We're going to have to meet the emergency needs of the American people. I mean, literally, I know you know this, Ken, that people are having trouble just putting food on the table, just having to keep the payment of their car, maybe able to turn the lights on. There's a dire, dire need to act now, purely out of what is a humanitarian need here at home. And thirdly, we're going to, in the third stage of this, the whole story is we're going to have to invest, as I suggested throughout the campaign, in infrastructure, in healthcare, and a whole range of things that are going to generate good paying jobs that will allow us to grow the economy.
So I love that. I think that's the right move to create jobs through focusing our resources on, building our infrastructure, improving our crumbling infrastructure, also focusing on, healthcare jobs that are of course tied to the pandemic that we're experiencing right now. So it appears as though he has the right idea. And when you really take a step back and you look at the bigger picture, first off, having a even minor majority in the Senate is a big deal for Democrats. And then on the House side of things, I don't want us to underestimate the importance of what progressives were able to accomplish in getting those pay-go carve-outs, right?
Yes.
Those pay-go carve-outs which allow for the House to pass legislation that doesn't require them to rely on, what they have in their budget now, right? Basically, pay-go prevents any type of deficit spending, but progressives succeeded in accomplishing these carve-outs for anything COVID related. And to be quite honest with you, the language for the carve-outs is so broad that it could be applied to pretty much anything that progressives want to implement. But yeah, Francesca, thoughts?
No, yeah, I mean, I have two specific thoughts. I think it's great that we're not asking, how are we going to pay for it? And he's not even dabbling in that language that even Democrats often dabble in, but they're certainly suckered into it by Republicans. Which if any Republican asks, how are we gonna pay for it? I'm just gonna be like, seditionist says what? Cool, that's what I thought. Cause I don't ever wanna hear them say anything, so they can sit right on down. But I also am curious, just generally going forward, how we hold some of the money that's already been doled out in these times of crisis. How are we gonna hold that money accountable in terms of where they went and who it went to? We know that PPP loans have gone to Jared Kushner's renters in his giant and homeowners in his giant buildings in Manhattan, like who protected one job. Like these are the millionaires who got, hundreds of thousands of dollars in loans. So where's the audit? And I believe the Congressional Progressive Caucus has put forward a bill and is asking for a complete audit of the money that's already been doled out. And the second thing is, I really hope that Biden is unafraid to go after that billionaire class. I hope, because hey, the truth is we do need to rein in their money through taxes and through an equitable tax structure. So I wanna know how we're going to do that, because they're making a killing in this time. The CEOs of Walmart, on all these other grocery store companies, let alone Amazon, to say nothing of Mr. Bezos. But what is our plan for actually creating some amount of wealth simply by creating a more equitable tax structure and holding some of these corporations to account?
Yep. Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you on that. Bare minimum would be to roll back the massive tax cuts for corporations and the wealthy under the Trump administration. Trump's notorious 2017 tax cuts for the rich. That's again bare minimum. Roll that back. But there are other specifics provided by Senator Sanders that I want to share with you. NBC News reporting that Sanders said he's eyeing a bold agenda that includes $2,000 in stimulus stimulus payments, enhanced unemployment insurance. Those two things I'm 100% in favor of. Access to childcare, I'm also in favor of. Action on climate change, which by the way, as we know, could actually create jobs that people desperately need. Mitigating student loan debt, and investing very significantly in expanding healthcare, including by lowering the Medicare eligibility age from 65 to 60. Now, the 65 to 60 number is not really that impressive. I'm sure it's gonna help people out, but not nearly enough people who are suffering during this pandemic. I would argue that strategically speaking, they should focus on relief bills that are a little more simplistic. So we know that Republicans support the $2,000 direct checks to Americans. And in this case, you would need a simple majority to pass this. So you don't have to worry about Mitch McConnell refusing to bring the legislation up for a vote. Start simple with that, along with the enhanced unemployment benefits. I'm really curious to see if we're gonna see more of these Joe Manchin-like Democrats, the same type of blue dog Democrats that gave us a lot of grief during the Obama administration, his first term specifically. And they need to be, there needs to be backlash against that type of rhetoric, as there was against Senator Joe Manchin after he said that he wouldn't support $2,000 stimulus checks. He actually walked it back quite a bit because there was so much backlash. And the argument I would make to anyone who's like, oh, it's too much spending. No, what's actually a lot more costly? Living in a country where you have tens of millions of Americans who literally feel like they have nothing to lose, because that has a lot to do with the instability that we're experiencing in this country. I don't want to minimize the impact of white supremacy in this country. That's a huge problem. But a lot of the unrest that we're seeing is also fueled by people who just feel like they have nothing to lose. They don't have jobs. They don't have the real economic relief they need. So we need to take care of people, especially when they're suffering through no fault of their own. They've done everything right. They've worked hard, and now they find themselves in this situation where they're laid off and aren't getting the help they need. That's why you have so many people who are on board with like opening businesses up prematurely, not engaging in social distancing. Right. It's not just that they're fatigued from the pandemic. It's just everything that comes along with the pandemic, everything that they're forced to do without getting the relief that they need in order to do it. That's a huge problem. And so I like what I'm hearing from Biden, but my point here is progressives need to continue applying pressure, because I don't think that Biden is going to be some incredible like progressive president, but obviously he can be pushed a little bit. I mean, The fact that he's rejecting austerity politics is a good sign.
Absolutely. And to be fair, the 60 to 65 or 65 to 60 lowering the eligibility of Medicare, that was part of Bernie Sanders' first year of enacting Medicare for all. He didn't talk about it too much, but it was a gradual rollout. So making progress. It can be a first step to Medicare for all. The thing I think that's really important to remember, and this is for everyone when you're arguing with your conservative, radicalized family members, is that Republicans were historically against any social program that now, if they floated trying to cut, they would be ruined for it politically. Social Security, they were so against Social Security, right? Oh, Medicare, so against Medicare, and both Medicare and Medicaid, they were against these programs. The GI Bill, all of these things that now, if they ever stood up against them, they would be hounded for it. Americans actually do believe in expanding these parts of the social welfare state for the common good, for the health of communities. I think it's on Democrats to absolutely draw a line in the sand. And like you were saying about Joe Manchin, make him the outlier. Don't cave to that centrism, right? Be bold. Don't do the taking away the single payer option of Obamacare like they did in 2009. Don't do that. Stick to your guns, right? And stick to these bold ideas. You will be vindicated in the long run, and the health of the nation will show for it.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.